Some big balance changes have just been announced for the Korean server version of the game. This will very likely come to us this following Thursday. They are massively increasing the cooldown on some support skills, making some skill reworks, and rebalancing how much boosts they provide. This affects Sword and Shield, Greatsword, Dagger, Longbow, Staff, Wand, Spear, and even the Orb. They will also actually be addressing the Tevent Orb stacking issue and adding a Calanthia trait selection box. They're also revamping the Tower of Greed rewards and adding a bunch of extra quality of life. They're also adding a new double up Archboss event. So let's go through everything we know so far. Again, the update releases on the Korean server. This will be for tomorrow, but following this Thursday, we'll most likely get the global patch. We can first see here a bit of a dev comment where they say they've been closely examining the recent combat environment and feel some protective skills have greatly increased the sustain of tanks and healers, and they notice that the downtime is getting shorter and shorter, which is having a significant impact on the combat landscape. So with these protective skills being maintained at a high frequency, this has ultimately disrupted the intended flow of attack and defense. So they're making a bunch of adjustments. They say that these adjustments aren't just about lowering numbers, but making it so you're going to have to strategically decide when you're actually going to use this skill, when it is the most important thing. And we can see evidence of this when we look at the Sword and Shield and Counter Barrier. You can already see they've gone from a cooldown of 21 seconds to 45 seconds, more than doubling it. However, they did increase the effect duration by 2 seconds. So it will last a little bit longer, but you will no longer be able to use it as often. For example, I have 9.5 seconds here cooldown, and even with this thing only lasting 6 seconds, I get my buff duration upwards of 80%, and I have 100% uptime on this ability. Combine that with this passive from Sword and Shield, which is also getting reworked, you could easily sustain 100% uptime on these defensive skills. And these are some massive boosts in terms of shield block chance, which results in all those CC effects missing, along with significantly reduced incoming damage. On top of that, you have the ability to reflect damage. But they're also addressing moral boost, so they're reworking this thing a bit, which provides a ton of cooldown to your abilities whenever you use a collision skill, of which you have quite a few, especially when you pair it with another weapon which has a lot of collision, along with using the multi-target chain hook collision. So we can see what they've done. They're limiting the certain skills that can actually benefit from this cooldown. So only attack, control, and movement skills, no longer survivability skills, will be affected by this passive, meaning it won't affect Counter Barrier anymore. It won't affect your Bastion or your Immortal Pride. And then there are other weapons which have very highly effective survival and tactics skills, which now your moral boost will also no longer affect. So this is some huge balance changing in terms of tanks right there. They will have to think tactfully when they're actually going to use these abilities, rather than just being able to spam them non-stop. They are also nerfing the amount of mana recovery that you get for blocking attacks. Now instead of 36%, you only get 7.2%. But this is the mana recovery values for players. For monsters, it should still be the same as before. Onto the Greatsword here. They're actually removing that reduction to the heal received effect from Guillotine Blade. I guess this could be in a way so that tanks aren't contributing to a lot more damage, but it also could be as a result, tanks will now be a bit more squishy, because they won't have 100% uptime on these survivability skills anymore. Similarly for your dagger, knife throwing, they seem to be also removing that effect which reduces the incoming healing. Just straight up removed. These changes could be done, so basically, yeah, tanks will probably need a bit more healing after this change, but also other players in general. If you look at Seeker with the heal over times, they've just been feeling quite useless. This could be a result of too many of these healing reduction effects going around, so they seem to be deciding to remove them. This should increase Seeker's viability a bit more. The Stamp of Death, the skill has been changed to ignore the target's shield defense probability. I think that's Fatal Stigma. You mark them and now the tank can no longer shield block that damage. In terms of Longbow, your Cleanse ability should now also add a reduction in cover effect received. I would assume that's on Purifying Touch. And on your staff, your Hellfire Rain, also removing that incoming healing reduction effect, along with Ice Tomb, now ignoring shield block chance. For your wand, when you use the Dark Apostasy and get that changed to all those skills, their effects will also ignore shield block chance. And then for the spear, they've changed this skill to be considered now attack. I believe that's your javelin, and this Ghost Storm skill, which I believe is Death from Above, has been changed to ignore shield block chance as well. Then for your orb, they're changing your Temporal Leap from a mobility skill to a survival skill. And with Distortion Veil, that increased movement speed effect, they're nerfing it from a 30% to a 15%. Won't be zooming around as easily. With your Supernova Collapse, it will now also ignore shield block chance, and they'll be fixing the tooltip of Temporal Leap that's supposed to specify the cooldown is only for attack and control skills. And in terms of items, the Tevent Orbs, they're fixing an issue where the maximum limit of debuff duration stat was not applied when stacking on a target. For weakening duration, it increases up to 60%. As far as I can deduce, that means you'll only be able to put your debuff duration of your enemy to 60%, which means this is a big change to the current meta. Right now, in an ideal group, you have one person with the tier 2 orb and one person with the tier 1 orb, and you get a total of 100% debuff duration on your target, which means all your curses, all your damage over times and everything have their durations double. And what that means is Curse Explosion deals double damage, as it's directly tied to the duration of those damage over time effects. So if I'm interpreting this correctly, they've now capped it at 60%. Like it was originally intended to, apparently, and they're fixing that issue, so it's capped at 60%. This means it's no longer viable to stack the tier 2 orb with the tier 1 orb, because the tier 2 orb will get to 60% maximum, and the tier 1 orb was there just to get that extra 40%. So yeah, no longer will it be viable to stack these, which will mean classes like Oracle, Fury, Invocator will all deal less damage. Pretty much anybody who used Wand Curses will deal less damage versus stacking those orbs as before, which is fair enough. Those classes were already dominating in the current PvE balance at endgame when you had those Tevent Orbs available, along with those people using Tevent Wands. You really need a Tevent Wand to make the most of this. The unfortunate thing here is I don't believe they mention the damage resistance in field bosses negatively impacting Curse Explosion twice. That means you cannot properly get good contribution against ascended field bosses. You can do fine against the arch bosses. They do not have that extra damage resistance. They simply have more HP, but just not field bosses. So you will notice this particularly after this nerf to Tevent Orb stacking. Looking at then the Tower of Greed revamp, what are they doing here? Well, the dev comment states that the Tower of Greed is content that almost all players can challenge from the beginning to the end of their growth. However, with the Relic and Alice Crystal placed as a core reward, it did not provide much merit for players starting to grow. Players who have reached a final stage in growth have been burdened with playing. Since the last Tower of Greed was released, the Path of Light in the middle area has been deleted, the cutscene for the space-time rift has been skipped, and the area can be passed through immediately when the space rift lucky is activated. So yes, we've seen that in the recent patch. And they've improved the convenience of the content, such as adding the quick step skill when holding a relic. And they also reorganized the rewards along with the end of the final season. So to provide practical help to players starting out, they've changed the rewards to include tier 3 hero equipment. This is not heroic equipment, guys. This is simply just purple gear. Hero in Korean with the direct translation is simply noble gear, tier 3 gear. Their actual heroic equipment, they call it the unique equipment with the direct translation. Since artifact crafting is mainly used by PvP players, the artifact analysis crystal can be obtained even without playing the Tower of Greed. They are transferring acquisition sources to Battlefield and Nebula merchants. This is awesome because yes, I agree, as a PvE player, I don't have a lot of incentive to bother with changing stats and upgrading stats on these artifacts because these increases are absolutely minuscule. They're still small in PvP, but it's more noticeable when you have stat counters. So you need to have, say, higher hit than your enemy's evasion. And when you're just at that borderline and you get an artifact which gives you like plus 60, that helps. That helps significantly. You're going from, say, missing some skills to, say, missing nothing. So this is a great change, allowing you to get those crystals by just actually playing PvP and then being able to use them for PvP. And they also say they'll continue to analyze the Tower of Greed season usage patterns and improve content to ensure smoother access. So let's have a look here. Tower of Greed rewards will be reset and any existing Jars of Greed items will no longer be usable. You can use newly acquired Jars of Greed. The amounts of Jars of Greed has been adjusted to be the same as the amount required for engraving, and Tower of Greed rewards will be changed, excluding, however, the artifact analysis crystals and the fragments of noble trait resonance stones. They've added Greed armor and accessory selection boxes, and 4 rare recovery stones will be added. So we'll ultimately have to see how impactful that is when we can actually look at the update potentially tomorrow. As for the store, in terms of your Battlegrounds merchant and Nebula merchant, they've added those artifact analysis crystals, and the sale of the Precious Blessing pouch sold by the raid item merchant will end. The Calanthia equipment extract selection box will be sold. That is cool. Calanthia equipment extract selection box. So this will allow you to guarantee obtain heroic traits. Although it will probably still be a roll, you'll just get to choose whether you're getting a weapon trait, a specific armor trait, or accessory trait, and then it's a roll within that. But we'll have to see. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. We were excited the last time they added the new pouch, but that ended up a bit of a disappointment, so hopefully this is better again. But good to see they seem to be listening and at least adding some new things that can be bought here. In terms of battlefield balance, they've added a grace period for defending the battlefield. It will remain for 7 seconds even after each team leaves the base, and it's released immediately when attacking or using a skill. This will just help even more to prevent your base camping. A main gate has been added in the front of the main base. It can be opened and closed using a lever. The lever will reactivate after 1 minute of operation. The position of the water gate lever has changed. The position has adjusted from the direction of the waterway to the direction of the main base, and they've added an effect that reduces evasion ability when attempting to capture. That is great to hear. If you were stacking a ton of evasion just because they've basically reduced your CC resistance while you're capping, you will now find that also to be reduced when capping. That's a good change. You should not be able to just cap a base under the nose of 10-20 players just because they don't have enough hit to hit you. There's a bit of a codex adjustment here, and with the Abyss Dungeon, with Silas, they've moved the teleportation stone located on the first floor to the entrance. They've added a crafting tab for walls and fences in crafting. The duration of the boss expedition when the boss appears has been increased from 1 hour to 10 hours. This just gives you more opportunity to actually do that expedition rather than it expiring after 1 hour. But that's ultimately it. They did some fixes here to Tower of Greed, like when the water level rises and your character getting stuck, fixing an issue on Nebula Island, fixing a guild skill, guild request. And in terms of artifact crafting, they've added the growth stats and the conversion stat headlines, titles, and they fixed an issue where users under exchange sanctions were able to receive profit distribution from your guild. So then having a quick look at what's this double up arch boss event, well, they don't really say a whole lot other than During the event period, Archboss and Light Archbosses will appear twice according to their appearance schedule. This will be from February the 24th to March the 10th, but this should be delayed by 2 days for us on Global. And otherwise, all items as part of the event are non-tradable. So we'll just have to see. Ultimately, some pretty decent improvements. Yes, it will suck if you were a Sword and Shield user and you were relying heavily on all your protection skills and your moral boost for cooldown. They have reworked that significantly. We'll have to wait and see how impactful the new Tower of Greed rewards appear to be, along with that new Calanthia trait choice pack. I'm hoping it's a true choice pack, but we'll see. Ultimately, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys around.